This story occurred a long time ago, when the Ashanti people went to war with other hostile African nations who threatened the Ashanti people's security and way of life. In those days, the Ashanti captured warriors of other nations and were themselves sometimes captured. A warrior captured alive was invariably taken into slavery and were seen as spoils of war and as part of a rich and powerful man's assets. Slaves were often valued and treated with care, especially if they were female princesses who had been captured in war. They were often absorbed into the household of powerful men as spouses. A little drummer boy named Kojo was captured by the king's lieutenant during one of such wars. The boy refused to be parted from the corpses of his dead brothers and father who had been killed when their village had been attacked and razed to the ground. The woman suddenly digressed and reiterated the fact that the Ashanti, because of their belief in retributive justice, treated persons they took into slavery with kindness and compassion, and indeed believed that everyone everywhere did the same. In any event, the little drummer boy was forcibly removed from his homeland and taken to the Ashanti Hene's household, where he became greatly loved by the Ashanti Hene of that time, and soon became the king's stool-bearer. Now Kojo was a handsome boy to behold. Indeed, he was as fair as the sun and as proud as a lion. The king's son and heir was no match for the charming and witty slave boy. The king loved his son, but like everyone else, was always dazzled by the handsomeness and wit of Kojo. Eventually, the king died in his sleep, and the wise men gathered together to discover the king's will and last testament. They discovered he had left his entire wealth and kingdom to Kojo. A shockwave went through the land at the announcement of the king's bequest. Many feared that Kojo's great love for women and revelry may not make him a good king. The late Ashanti Hene had, however, included a proviso that his wealth and the kingdom would only pass on to Kojo only after Kweku, the natural heir to the throne, had been allowed 3 days to make a choice of only one possession out of the Ashanti Hene's massive wealth. Kweku, after making his choice, would together with his mother and sister be banished from the palace forever. Kweku's mother and sisters wept and agonized over what advice to give Kweku. Finally, the fateful day dawned. Kweku took a sad and solitary walk through the woods, and as he did so, he came upon an old woman who was trying to lift a bundle of firewood onto her frail back. Kweku, forgetting his own troubles, ran to the old woman's help. He carried the bundle of wood all the way to the old woman's home. The old woman was touched by Kweku's kindness, but remarked at his sad and troubled face. The old woman invited Kweku to sit with her in her little hut for a while. As soon as Kweku was seated, he told the old woman about his plight. Kweku's mother, the queen, had warned Kweku that Kojo had a considerable number of allies. Some of Kojo's allies were old enemies of Kweku's father, the late king, and wished to erase the name and memory of the dead king. These individuals had become Kojo's trusted advisors. Kojo, being the ruthless and proud person that he was, would brook no opposition to his rule or popularity in the land. He would definitely barter off Kweku, his sisters and mother, as slaves to some distant land where they would never be heard of again. The old woman listened carefully in silence and sighed deeply before making her response. She began speaking very clearly and urgently to Kweku. She remarked that the dead Ashanti Hene had acted with great wisdom when he made his will. The king, the old woman remarked, must have recognized undesirable traits of arrogance and selfish pride in Kojo the slave boy, in spite of his great wit and good looks. Kojo, the old woman pointed out, would have been a thorn and a source of dangerous opposition to Kweku in years to come. The king's calculation was that Kweku would eventually obtain the wisdom or be guided to choose Kojo, the slave boy, as his prized possession, and thereby setting the record straight and firmly establishing who was the rightful heir to the throne. Kweku had finally solved the mystery of his father's will. The will had indeed been far from a cruel one. Kweku thanked the old woman effusively for her kindness and ran all the way back to the palace, where everyone who were friends or foe of the old king had gathered to hear Kweku make his choice. Kweku, brimming with newfound confidence, chose Kojo, and consequently all that the slave boy owned, as his singular cherished possession. There was tumultuous joy and jubilation throughout the land at the young prince's astute choice. The Ashanti kingmakers quickly and happily enthroned Kweku as their new Ashanti Hene. The young king was magnanimous by nature, and in victory, he decreed that Kojo be returned to live as a free man in his own homeland, and never to return to Ashanti land again. As for the old woman who had helped Kweku, she was never seen in the forest or woods again. The new king longed to reward her for her kindness to him, The king's soldiers searched high and low for her, but all traces of the old woman had vanished. The woman appeared in a dream to the king 1 month later. She said she was a heavenly being, traveling through different lands. She rejoiced that Kojo had understood that kindness was a vital attribute to be possessed by all. The new king was always to show kindness and grant justice to everyone in his kingdom, regardless of their age or station in life. Greatness is about the way we treat other people. The old woman urged the young king never to forget that.